Good evening and welcome to Talking Energy, the first in JPS's live webinar series about all things energy. My name is Kalilah Reynolds. I'll be your host and moderator for this evening, taking you through the proceedings. And today's first topic is actually a very exciting and a very interesting one that many of my followers have asked me about. It's all about solar, the real deal with solar. As you know, over the past few years, many people have been turning to solar energy as a means of trying to bring down their light bill, because you know electricity, especially in Jamaica, is very expensive. Those costs can really add up. I've been learning a lot about how the pricing works behind it. And so as a means of trying to get cheaper energy, you may have invested or be looking to invest in solar electricity for your home. Or you may have already made that investment and you're not quite sure exactly how it works, what the next steps are. If you're looking to sell energy back to the grid, back to JPS, you're in the right place. If any of these situations sound like you, you're in the right place. So before we get into our panel this evening, let me just give you a couple of housekeeping matters. If you have a customer service issue, please go to JPS's Facebook or Twitter page at MyJPSOnline, and you can put your issue or your complaint over there. We want to keep the comments in this platform strictly about solar. Now we know that part of the experience in going solar may have been disappointing for some people. So you may have made that investment. It could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, and you may not have been seeing the return that you expected. And so we're here to address those issues now, because what we've found is that it's really an information issue. Maybe you've done something wrong. Maybe you just don't have the information that you need. And that's why we're here to talk about it this evening, Talking Energy with JPS, the first Thursday of every month, starting with today's topic, the real deal with solar. So let me introduce our panel for this evening, starting with the gentleman to my immediate left. His name is Richard Gordon. He's the Manager of Business Development Projects at JPS's Business Development Department, specifically responsible for renewables. Hi, Richard.
Hi.
All right. And next is Volton Campbell. He's a Manager of Business Development Projects in the same department for energy services.
Hi, how are you?
Volton, you have a very electrifying name. You're in the right job.
I've been told that before, yes.
Next to him is a gentleman named David Barrett. He's actually not from JPS. You and I are the only non-JPS people on the panel, David. And David is with ENBAR Consulting. They're a project management company in energy. And then at the far end is the lovely gentleman who told me his name was Cliff, but actually his name is Errington Case, and he's the Manager of Grid Interconnection here at JPS. Hi, Errington.
Good evening, Kalilah.
All right, so let's get right into our discussion this evening. A lot to go through, so we really don't want to waste any time because we have so many issues to scale through, and I know that you have your comments. Please drop them in the chat, and we'll get to a question and answer segment after these gentlemen have given their presentations. So starting with Richard. Richard, what does it actually mean to go solar?
All right, let's get right into it. So to go solar, that expression means using solar or photovoltaic technology, as it's called, to generate electricity from the sun and produce that electricity in your home or in your business to reduce what you would normally purchase from the utility. So as you'll see in an image now, you'll see the main components of one of the most basic forms of a solar system, which is a grid-tied system. The most basic components, I'll list them out. There are a solar panel, which goes on the roof quite often, and an inverter. Those are the two key components, and we'll speak about a little bit later about other systems that include batteries and so forth. But those are the two primary systems, and you're able to produce electricity in your home or your business, and you're able to reduce either partially or completely what you would normally purchase from the utility.
Okay, so all these systems have inverters, because I see when you buy AC and some fridges now, it say come with inverter. Inverter.
Yeah, so it's a technology that converts electricity of one form to another. So in the case of a solar system, the solar panel produces DC energy, as it's called. That's like what you have in the phone, in the battery in your phone. your electric vehicle or the battery in any other device, your flashlight. But that's not the type of electricity that you use to power your refrigerator, your radio, your TV. So that inverter in the solar system converts that electricity from the solar panels into the electricity that you use in your homes.
Okay. What does it mean to be partially solar?
To be partially solar means you have a certain amount of energy that you need every month. You'll see it on your light bill, 200 kilowatt hours, 300 kilowatt hours, whatever the number may be. If you're able to produce some of your own energy and reduce what you would buy from the utility, then you're partially, you have a partial system. You're partially able to be self-sufficient.
So you'd still be connected to JPS's
You'd still be connected
grid,
to JPS.
and you pay the difference basically from what your solar system doesn't produce.
Basically.
Okay, so is anybody able to completely come off the grid?
You are able to completely come off the grid. It's really all about the economics and what you really want to achieve. So for most persons, they want to reduce their energy cost. And if you go to the objective of trying to come completely off the grid, as we'll discuss later, it can become quite cost prohibitive.
How so?
How so? Because once you start to introduce components such as batteries, they bring with them a high energy cost. We'll touch on it a bit more later, but the cost of batteries is high, and you're basically trying to store energy that you produce in the day, because of course the sun shines in the daytime. So you have to produce an excess amount of energy in the day, store it and hold it for use in the evening and into the night. So in order for you to be self-sufficient, then you have to be storing more and more energy to take you longer into the night, into the morning, which means you have to make your batteries bigger. And if you're going to make your batteries bigger, then your own power plant, those solar panels, they have to produce more energy, which means you need a lot more panels. So you end up putting in a lot more panels, a lot more batteries, just to try and take you through the entire night into the following morning.
So do most people then do the partial, at least for residential?
What is quite popular in Jamaica is that people will be off the grid, powering their entire home for a part of the day. And once the batteries have run out, then they switch over to the grid. That's the most popular type of battery-based system in Jamaica.
Okay, because then the evening and night is when most people use the most energy anyway.
For residential customers, yes.
Okay, for commercial customers, because they're pretty much open in the day, not so much at night, and if you're manufacturing in the day, not so much at night. So is it more likely that commercial customers can go completely off-grid?
It's more likely that commercial customers, and this is what predominates worldwide, most commercial customers will use grid-tied systems where they don't actually have batteries. Because they are consuming energy at the same time when energy is being produced, meaning the daytime, then they don't have much need for batteries to be storing energy. They can maximize the use of the lower production costs from a very simple grid-tied system, utilize that advantage, and they're able to get maximum savings from those types of systems.
Interesting. Well, let's move on to Volton. So Volton, it is very important, I imagine, to have a proper assessment before you actually decide to go solar. So tell me the importance of having that assessment before you make that investment.
Okay. It's important to have an assessment because, one, you need to be sure what you want, and not only that, be sure that the area you're going to install the system in, it's adequate for what you want, and if not, what modifications you need to essentially make. Now, well, first of all, to start an assessment, you need the proper tools. For example, your service provider should have particular tools to assist them in doing this assessment, meaning looking at your house, your facility, and decide where your photovoltaic system should be and where the other components should be installed, meaning the batteries, inverter, and that type of thing. Now, in most facilities, you install on the roof because that's the most convenient place. And one thing to note in terms of installing on a roof is that it must be adequate, or it must be safe, or it must be in good condition. Because the worst thing you can do is install a system on a roof that needs to be changed, or is leaking, or in bad condition. So that's the first important thing you need to pay attention to in an assessment. The next thing is the type of roof. Your roof can be flat, or it can be, you'd call it on a triangle. And what that simply means is that you will not be able to right, as we're seeing there, you will not able to install PV panels on all the areas of the roof if it is in a triangle position. If it's flat, then you have a better opportunity to use most of the space on the roof.
So flat roofs are better.
They are better.
And then in terms of space, how much space do you need? Because a lot of people, especially in urban areas, you might live in a townhouse, you don't have a big roof.
In terms of space, you might need a, let's call it a 15 by 15 feet area, or it could be larger, depending on the size of the house. But of course, you're constrained by other things before we talk about space. In terms of, one, if it is you think you have enough space, other considerations are the orientation of the roof. Meaning, if it is, your roof is such that you cannot face all the panels to the south, which is where you get most of the sunlight. Like half of the roof is to the north and half is essentially to the south. You might have a reduced system or being able to install only a small amount of panels. With a flat roof, you can, to some extent, utilize all the roof space. And another thing in terms of the assessment, it is shading. Meaning, you might have a flat roof, 20 feet by 20 feet, but because you have a tree nearby or a building nearby, you'll have shading during the day or particular times of the year. So that's another part of the assessment you need to do. And to do that, which is very, very important, there's an instrument you can use called a solar pathfinder. What it does, it actually can tell you when you actually put it in a particular space for how many hours of the day and how many months of the year a particular spot is shaded. So you might have a roof which is very big, but because of the shading, you can only use maybe just half of the roof itself.
So don't just go out and buy a bunch of solar panels. Make sure you get that assessment done first.
Right, that assessment. And the other thing, another thing to pay attention to apart from the shading is also that you need to do an assessment of the load you actually have in your facility itself in terms of the energy they utilize. And not only the energy they utilize, but when they utilize that energy. Because the sun is only up between, let's say, 7 and 4 in the afternoon, and that's when the system is really operating or generating energy. Now, if it is that you're not using the energy within that period, you've lost it. If you don't use it, you lose it. Meaning you have to send it to the grid.
Or you store it in the batteries
or you store it.
Richard was talking about.
Which leads to another issue in terms of additional components, which is a battery, which costs more money, which extends the payback. And we can talk a little bit more about that later. And another thing to bear in mind too is hazards, meaning if it is that your roof is extremely high, that's another issue in terms of installation. If it is you have electrical wires within the area or nearby the roof, you can have an issue there. If the roof is sloped, extremely sloped, it's difficult to work there, that's another thing you need to pay attention to. So these are some of the things that you pay attention to in terms of doing an assessment.
So give us an overall or a summary, give us a checklist.
Right, and it is, one, where you're going to install the system. Is it on the ground or on the roof? If it's on the roof must be in good condition. Also, in terms of the orientation of the roof, it must be such that you can point the panels in the south direction at an angle of around 18 degrees. Additionally, in terms of shading, you must be conscious or do an assessment in terms of where on the roof is actually shaded and avoid those areas. And the next and final thing is that you must pay attention to hazards and preparation you need to make to avoid these hazards.
And any other red flags to look out for?
All right. If it is that a contractor does not do a load assessment, then that is a big red flag in the sense that you need to get information that shows you how the owner actually uses energy. And they usually do that by doing a login or power login using particular equipment called power loggers. And that shows you when you turn on equipment, when you turn off equipment, how much energy you use in the period of the production of the solar system. And if it is that you do not use equipment during that particular period, you can change your lifestyle in the sense that you start use equipment during that high production period between 7 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. So persons who work at home now during this COVID period, it's a good idea to actually maybe using your ACs and other equipment during that period when you have high production from your PV system and you want to have an impact on your electricity
Well, that's
bill.
when it's hot anyway, in the day.
Exactly. So for those persons who are working at home now, it's a good opportunity to maybe have a PV system. And another thing in terms of that red flag is, if it is that important thing, if that shading analysis is not done, and I've seen it happen before, where because the system is shaded, it cannot work to its full capacity. So a system may be rated at, let's say, 5 kW, and you only use maybe less than a half of that, maybe 2 or 3 kW. So you don't get the full benefit of a PV system, meaning...
So that assessment will help you to know how much capacity you should invest in.
Yes, yes, and how much roof space you can use and the maximum size of the system you can actually get.
If you get too much, you now bother, it just waste.
Yeah, it wastes, and you might have to store if you have excess, or you might have to sell to the grid, which that's relation to next net billing.
We're going to talk a lot more about net billing shortly, so let's jump over to Errington. Errington, start out by explaining what exactly you do.
Okay. The government of Jamaica has an energy policy that is really seeking to increase the amount of renewables that is produced on the island. They actually have a target set for 2030. By 2030, they want to have 50% of the energy that is produced on the island produced from renewables. Solar is one of the larger set of renewables that's available on the island. So my team actually, the license which are issued by the government for persons who have gotten onto the net billing program, which is a program instituted by the government which allows customers to generate electricity for their own use and then sell the excess back to the grid. My team is actually responsible for getting those licenses from the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology and actually executing contracts with these customers. And we commission their systems, they go live, and then they are now able to benefit from the excess that is sold back to the grid. But in addition to that, we interact with a lot of the customers after they are commissioned and after they've been on the system. So we get the opportunity to find out and to be close to them when they are having the issues in terms of what are their expectations concerning their solar system. Are these expectations being met? And we actually get the opportunity to help them to maximize the use of their system. I want to talk a little bit about what Richard mentioned earlier, that solar is only produced in the day, right? There are some optimum hours in the day when solar production happens. And if your usage, which predominantly for most persons who go to work and come home in the evening, is not coinciding with the production in the day, then you have a problem. So for most persons who, when they get home in the evening, I mean, when you get home after work and you're in your hot tub, you're turning on your jacuzzi, you're watching your television, you're having fun, you're playing music, the kids are on the computer, all of that stuff is happening. For most of us residential customers, that is happening after 6 p.m. When solar production is not available.
Right.
So it is very important that you manage that usage to ensure that as much of that usage as possible, you shift it to the production hours, because what you'll find happening is that you have this huge investment in solar, but your electricity bill seems to not be impacted by your investment. Now, one of the things...
That actually happens? You have people who've invested and their light bills still don't go down?
I've had some persons who... I can give you an example. Someone spent over $1 million on a system. The bill before was about $30,000. The payment that the payment to the bank was roughly about a $20,000 a month payment.
Because they took out a loan to invest in the system.
At the end of the month, that bill went down to $25,000. So can you imagine the headspace of that
now
person?
You have
so instead of having a saving, they now have a cost, an additional cost.
Right.
Because one, the assessment wasn't done properly. Two, they didn't manage their usage outside of the production hours. And I have some graphs which I can show you a real life situation, because these graphs, we actually download the data, the consumption history data from the meter of these customers. If you look at the graph now, this customer, if you notice, their usage is peaking after 6 p.m.
So their usage is in blue or
in the
red?
blue line. The blue line is showing their usage, and the orange line is showing their solar production. I think first thing you can notice, if you notice the solar production, it's actually a jagged line going up and down, up and down, up and down. What happens normally during the day, when you have these little cloud covers passing over, it actually interrupts the production of electricity. So it's not just a smooth, full-out production. When the clouds pass over, production drops. And even now, like this month, I know there are a lot of complaints because
It's been raining a lot.
it's raining a lot. And in the afternoons, once it hits 12:1, it's raining, cloud cover. So solar production goes all the way down. Anybody who had a projection in terms of having a fixed rate of return for that particular month is gonna be in problems for that month.
Oh, so rainy season, you don't really get much benefit.
You won't get as much. So you go into this investment, there are opportunities, but you have to be very wise about it. You have to be able to maximize those opportunities by one, shifting your load. So if you have a solar system, you know one, the helper does all the ironing in the day when the sun is hot. All of the other things, if it's your electric stove, you use it in the day. If you're using water heater, let the water heater, put it on a timer. Let it produce hot water in the day. Let that shut off by 3 p.m. These guys are better able to tell you what time in the evening. And so that once it hits that non-production time, 5 p.m. going on into the evening, you're now operating at as a minimalist. I don't know if you watch DIY and you see these off-grid. They have these shows and they talk about people living off the grid. And the lifestyle change that they have to make in order to make these systems work efficiently. Once solar is not being produced, you now have to curtail the things you do in order to realize the saving. The other graph which is there, it's actually someone who went and did the investment, and it was in the summer and they were running the AC through the night until maybe about 4 a.m. every morning, right? And what happened, as you can see in the graph, so before the day, they are on JPS when the AC is being used throughout the night. So all the savings they would make by offsetting during the day, they never realized that because their usage was still pretty high. Another thing which we have to note.
Wait, so what was their bill? How did their bill change?
This is actually the same guy now. This is the one who got the 30,000, and then at the end of the month, when they put in the solar, it went down to by $5,000
to
with a $20,000 repayment, right? So there's a discipline that's required. There's a discipline that's required in terms of shifting your load, and there's an awareness that they need to know. Another thing is 50 to 70% of most households, of their usage comes from their refrigerator.
Wow, up to 70%?
Up to 70%. And your refrigerator runs 24/7. So the window of opportunity for saving on that it's just limited to those maybe about 6 hours of the day. So once you make this investment, you have to know in the back of your mind that those usage hours outside of the solar production hours are going to remain on the bill. Only if you plug out that fridge in the evenings, that's the only way it's going to be there. So I'd say to people, if an investor comes here and tell you that he's going to make you have a zero electricity bill, if there are not batteries, which Richard spoke about, which is going to take that load, and if you don't make that significant investment where those batteries can take you for the entire time. I know of even a case where the person had a significant investment in batteries, but then they cast off restraint. So even with the batteries...
What does that mean? They did what? Cast off restraint?
Cast off restraint. They no longer were mindful of being disciplined in their usage of electricity.
Because they had these batteries
because
and
they have the
thought they were
batteries,
good.
they say, yes, we're good. We can live the life now, right? And they just use electricity. When we did the analysis, by 7 p.m. in the evening, those batteries were fully discharged. And so from 8 p.m. going onwards, it's back to JPS.
From 7 p.m. in the evening?
It only lasted about 2 hours.
Oh my
those
goodness.
Batteries. And then Richard mentioned something. If you want, the longer the hours you have to go, it's the more your battery investment. So if you really want batteries to take you through the night, you have to do you have to do 2 things. One, you have to reduce and manage, maybe retrofit, change out the lights, go to inverter refrigerators, go to appliances that are not such high energy users, and you have to keep those low. And two, you either will have to invest significantly in batteries which can take you for longer hours, right? But I can tell you opportunities are there, but it requires discipline and it requires consistency. I know of persons who have been disciplined and have realized significant savings. You mentioned earlier the commercial customers. Commercial customers are having a great time with solar in Jamaica. Most of the commercial customers I've spoken to, most of their load is from AC. The office load is air conditioned, and that's a bulk of most of these commercial building loads. And once they put in a solar system that is almost the same capacity as their AC unit, they are seeing significant savings, and they are smiling all the way to the bank, and they are really enjoying having their solar system. The real issue I find in the marketplace is with residentials, because their natural lifestyle doesn't lend itself for high usage during the day. It's normally after 6 p.m. going into the night, and that's a challenge that we have with the residential customers. It requires discipline. So for entertainment, you may have to look at using laptops. I mean, in my household, that's what most of my family, instead of having the television and running the television and all of that, you're using laptops. Laptops can be charged in the day. You can use your laptops in the night. I'd suggest that for persons.
See, I wouldn't even think of that.
Yeah, you
because I still plug in my laptop same way.
You're off-grid. You're getting your internet services. You're watching your Netflix. You're doing all the great things you want to do. You're not burning electricity. So it's just about being smart in how you use your electricity, and you can really maximize that investment that you make.
All right, so let's talk some more about these batteries. Richard, I'm curious about them. So first of all, how these batteries look? Some big batteries, some big, small? I don't know. What type of batteries are we talking about?
The most popular types of batteries that you'll see are lead-acid batteries. They're similar to truck batteries, bigger than what we have in our cars. More popular these days are lithium-ion batteries or lithium-ion-based batteries. Those are the size of a computer. They're much smaller, much more compact.
A desktop or a laptop?
A desktop. You can fit it on the wall or it fits on the ground. So instead of having a room of batteries, you can have just one desktop-looking battery.
And about how many of those do you need to take you through the night?
It will vary based on the customer, but I would say you can go up to 15, 20 batteries to take you through the night. For a lithium-ion battery, if it's in the region of 10 to 15 kilowatt hours, that can take you through the night. But
how much these batteries cost?
That's the killer. Batteries are expensive. So batteries, one of those batteries in a lead acid can be $25,000 and up, and the bigger the battery, the more it costs. Lithium-ion batteries, even though the cost is coming down, they're still expensive. Those can be $700,000 for a 7 kilowatt hour battery going up.
And that's the smaller one, the size of the computer?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a pretty decent expense.
Yeah, so before you take out your hard-earned money, you really need to understand the numbers that go into that investment.
All right, so how do they work with a solar system, and what differences in operation are there if I have batteries as opposed to if I don't have batteries?
Well, primarily with photovoltaic systems, a battery, you want to charge it from the sun and not from the grid. So you need to produce excess electricity from your own system in the daytime, because that's the only time that you can produce your own energy. And you have to store that in the batteries to use it in the evening when the sun has gone down, and as long as it can take you into the night. As we mentioned before, yes, you're able to technically power your home all through the night. But a key thing for customers to remember is to go back where this all started. If the objective was to reduce your energy cost, then the key thing is to invest in a system that will produce your own energy at a lower cost. Many times customers have no idea what their actual production cost is from their own energy system until years later they're able to realize, when they have to replace the batteries, they realize they have not really saved.
So how long do the batteries last? How soon before you might have to replace it?
You'll find generally for lead acid batteries, based on design, they will last anywhere from 2.5, 3, sometimes 3.5 years. Lithium-ion batteries, again, based on design, they can go anywhere from 8 to 12 years on average.
Okay, so the lithium-ion is the more expensive one and they last longer.
Yeah, yeah.
So which one is the better investment?
For me, the better investment is lithium-ion because you can get, in a battery-based system, you can get a lower production cost, meaning the electricity that you produce for yourself, you can get it at a lower cost if designed correctly with a lithium-ion based system.
So how do I charge these batteries?
You charge them from the sun, so they're electrical devices.
You have to plug it into anything? How?
Well, it's going to be connected to your panels. You'll have things like what they call charge controllers, which manages the energy from the solar panel that feeds into the battery. The best option is typically to charge your battery from what we call excess energy, which means in the daytime you have your refrigerator and whatever you have running your home at the time. You supply that first with your solar production, and any excess energy that's left over, you use that to charge your battery. That way you're optimizing your own production to displace what you'd normally buy from the grid. That's where you get the maximum return on investment. Charging the batteries to use in the nighttime, that return on investment is going to be a lot lower, and sometimes it's not even a positive return on investment.
Interesting. See, I'm learning a whole lot today because this is something that my family was considering, and okay, importance of the assessment, yes. So how do I know, Richard, if I should get a grid-tied or a battery-powered solar system?
Okay, I'll deal with the grid-tied first since it's easier.
Okay, what's the grid-tied?
So as it was shown earlier in the image, a grid-tied is the most basic form. It has panels, inverter, whatever sunlight is available, that light is available, it converts it to electricity and feeds it into your electrical panel. So once there's sun, you have production. It's not trying to store any energy. So for example, if there's available light now, you'll have sufficient production. If it's producing more than you need, that excess energy flows over onto the grid. If 5 minutes later there's a cloud cover and you're producing less than you need, then that additional energy you need comes from the grid.
So that's what would be sold to JPS?
Yes. So when you have excess, you can sell it to JPS, and when you don't have enough, JPS supplies it. It works seamlessly with the grid, and that's why it's called a grid-tied system. It's simple, less components, which means it's the cheapest way of producing electricity with a solar system. And globally, this is the most popular system. And it's, as you heard Arrington mention, it's used a lot by commercial customers, especially if they're operating during the daytime. If they're operating 7 days a week, it's even better because they're able to get a return on investment for 7 days of the week, as opposed to maybe a doctor's office that might be 5 days a week. So for commercial customers, grid-tied systems are very popular. Residential customers can use them as well, but it's very critical in terms of the sizing, because as you heard Arrington mention, on the average user, there's probably just 18 to 25% of all your energy that you use every month that you're actually able to displace using solar, using a grid-tied system. So there's always that attractiveness for the residential customer to invest in batteries, in energy storage systems, because once you've learned that you're using a lot more energy in the evening, you want to reduce that energy, that light bill. And it seems attractive to just, invest in batteries, and then you must be lowering your energy costs, but it doesn't always work out.
Okay, and lastly in this segment, tell me about the importance of battery warranties.
Warranties are very important for all the critical equipment, panels, inverters, and batteries especially, because it's a huge investment. It's important to understand what warranty you have and to get a copy of that warranty document from the original equipment manufacturer. Should anything happen to those batteries, as can happen with any electrical equipment, you want to know how you can get recourse. How can this be replaced or repaired? Because you don't want to make a huge investment, something goes wrong, and after a year, suddenly the system is of no use because you have no warranty.
Yeah. Let's move on to the independent voice on the panel. David, you're with ENBAR. Tell me about the consultant's approach to general installations.
Okay. So as a consultant, I will approach a project with a fairly neutral eye. The main objective is, what does the client want? What do they want to achieve? And then for me, it is to structure their costs, their resources, and their interest towards getting those targets met. a lot of the things which have already been met and said by the gentleman here are things that I will do. I've had clients who have, they're in a lovely green space and they're saying, wow, I'd like to put solar. And I have had to break it to them that it's going to be solar or your trees. And, you know, that's a little rough, but again, with a neutral eye. I've had situations where a client may already have a plan. They may have had a chat with their neighbor or whoever it is, and there's a particular path they want to follow. And I might be able to bring a different objective towards it. So I'll give you one example. There's a development agency that wanted to do solar and energy efficiency. And when I looked at the roof they had, I said, well, why don't you apply what is called a cool roof technology? It will reduce the temperature of your roof. It was a slab roof. Immediately, you will have low air conditioning requirements, and your solar system itself will shade the roof. So instead of them spending more money for more air conditioning and a larger renewable system, they could build a smaller system and have the building cool. In fact, their first complaint to me was the building is too cold. Because now, now everybody's turning the AC up. So I go in with that neutral eye. There are things which I will see.
So what's the cost of the cool roof technology compared to the solar installing?
So the cool roof technology is much, much less expensive. And there are different applications. There are spray foam applications. There are silicone-based painted applications. The most basic of it is just to paint your roof white, okay? But the ones I mentioned are on top, but you also have underlying fiberglass options or sheeting, insulation that can reduce the amount of heat that comes into your building. And so just from that perspective, one of the things I do, and it's been said, is energy efficiency.
Right.
Don't plan to match your solar system to your current exact consumption unless you understand how much you can save. So can you change out all those incandescent lights and get LEDs? In fact, even the fluorescent lights use more energy than your LEDs. You can get that changed. Can you get inverter refrigerators or other ACs on your next purchase? Those are things. So once you bring those costs down, you will see your demand going down, and then you can get a solar system that's more affordable with a faster payback period, for example. And because solar is modular, you can always add another panel, another 2 panels, whatever it is. And you can size your inverter, which is a device that goes from your direct current from your panel, your modules, to your regular plug-in alternating current. So those are things that I will bring to the table. Some of the clients...
Those are great tips. I bet you everybody go buy white paint tomorrow. Paint up the roof.
I would give them, there are better options, but white paint, does help.
It's a start.
Yes, and we have left, dare I say, colonial past, where most buildings were white. Most buildings had a veranda. Most buildings had a wraparound space and a lot of greenery. And we have gone from that to boxes. Most apartments going up now, they're just big boxes. Okay, so those are the things I bring to the table. An independent eye, helping you to reduce your electricity, but I also help clients to interact with or interface with their provider. So some providers may want to guide their clients in a particular direction. They may, let's say for example, they may want you to get a lot of batteries, okay? And I would ask the question, what are you going to use your battery for? If you are a person
because it's in their interest, they want to sell the batteries.
Well, business has to be done, right? But the client may go to bed at 8 o'clock. You may be one of those who go to sleep at 8, everything goes off. What are you going to use your battery for? On the flip side, if you live in a remote area, or perhaps you're not getting the quality of electricity you want, or you have blackouts from time to time, a recommendation may be made, why not get batteries? Because that will help you to remain consistent, especially these days we're working from home, right? And if you live in some, I won't call it a parish, one of those parishes that experiences fluctuations, and you're doing business, maybe you should get batteries. so that you can maintain your productivity on a consistent basis. And then Richard spoke about the grid tie system with battery base, but the way that you connect that battery makes a difference how much you have to use. So your system, your modules, your PV modules, panels as people call it, it's really a module, will deliver power first to your batteries if you are off-grid, first to your batteries, and then excess it will export. But it's also possible to connect it so that your power is exported and the remainder, as Richard said, can then go to the battery. But that's the
so you can do both. I thought it was either or. You either store it or you sell it. So
you may fill your battery, as it were, right, and still have excess to sell. But the way that you configure it,
that probably means that you bought too much to begin with, no?
Not necessarily, because some persons do want to be a part of the net billing program. So they are
do it
deliberate
for that specific reason.
Exactly. They want to export. So all those things come into play. And it's valuable, I think, the kind of recommendations that can come in the mix. Then you have the matter of looking at the quality of the installation. Some installations are not as great as they should be. And if you have someone with a technical eye, a project manager, someone in my space, we can see an installation in the early stages before it is completed and you pay over that last dollar. And we may recommend that you have your installer do certain things. So when it comes to choosing your installer, if I can go there, choosing your installer is very easy in today's world. You can Google ABC Solar Company. A number of companies will come for Jamaica. Why should you just stop there? You should probably talk with your neighbors, find out their experiences. And you can ask the company directly. I don't mind being forthright. You can ask the company directly, give me some names of places that you have done your work. You're not doing you a favor, you're paying for it.
Right.
So give me some references. They'll give you some references. But you can go beyond that to say now, are you registered? Because there are a lot of enthusiasts out there, and there are companies. And the companies which are going to be with you for the 5 or 8 years of your battery, and the 20 years of your module is a company, an entity that's going to be registered.
Registered with whom?
Company's office. They'll pay their taxes.
Registered as a business.
Registered as a business. So they can be found by the government of Jamaica or legal entities should there be a problem. That's who you want to go with, right? Once you can confirm that this is indeed a legitimate company, then the next thing you probably want to do with them is have a sense of how certified they are. So it's one thing to have a company by some fancy name, Solar Forever, you know, .com. But do they have an engineer? Do they have anybody who has any electrical competence? Do they have anybody who was trained by HART or UWR, UTEC or Vector or you know, Florida Solar Institute or CEM or whatever it is, NAPSET? Because you need to have those persons who understand that electricity can kill you and it can burn your house down. When they're finished with that system, if you ever have to go on your roof and that system is not grounded, you may not come back down, at least not on your own volition. Okay? So you want to make sure the company understands those details. And if you're settled yourself up to that point in time, you can keep moving with them. So it's time to have a consultation, the gentleman already mentioned. Have them come into your house. Let them look at your bill. No, 1 month is not enough, because December and August are not the same consumption. So you really need at least a month. If you're a company, they should put a...
August is AC season.
There you go. They should put a data logger on your system to see really how you're... So it's a device that tracks the amount of energy that you use on a 15-minute basis. And it actually records it, and you can put it on a graph and see exactly. So I might say, oh, I don't use power in the night, everybody's gone. But this data logger can show that my lights are tripping on at midnight, et cetera, et cetera.
But the JPS app is very helpful with that now, isn't it?
It's very, very helpful. I looked at mine before I came here, and I could see, you know, the months when I use more or less. So
And the times of day.
and the time, well,
Yeah, it breaks it down to times of day.
you can, yes, you can see the times of day, you know. So you now have this opportunity to consult with the company, talk to them. And typically we allow the company to come to our house, but I would even recommend you go to their location, see what they have. Do they have a warehouse? Do they have trucks? Or everyone who comes to your house drives a car to install equipment on your house? A little question, you know, do they have the equipment? Very, very important. Then there are a lot of, I come in again where the questions of how much is it going to cost you? You ask those questions. How much is it going to cost you? If someone says, oh, $1 million and you know you can come off the grid completely, I might say, let me see the numbers, you know.
Without doing an assessment.
Without doing an assessment. The question may be asked, how long is it going to take? And the company says, I get that done for you in 1 week. Well, if you're going on net billing, it's not going to happen in 1 week.
How long would it likely take?
The nightmare version.
Why do you sigh first?
The nightmare version was 1.5 years.
What?
The nightmare. But typically, if the government licensing process may take up to 3 weeks. Okay.
Also, you have to get licensed with the government first under the net billing program.
Yes. Then you may have a time of about 2 to 3 weeks when the government electrical inspectorate comes in. They make sure that your drawings are properly aligned. It will do what it says it will do. It is properly grounded, as in it is safe, electrical is safe. JPS will come in, and I know they're working on their time frames, but sometimes there's a little bit of complaint how long that is, but JPS will come in along the way. Then once all those parties are satisfied that the place is safely wired, the equipment will work, etc., etc., there's some additional equipment. It could take you 6 months. It could.
Is that likely? Is that the typical?
Unfortunately, a lot of persons I interact with have a 6-month period.
Well, I can shed some light on the JPS aspect of it because that's directly my portfolio at JPS. The process is broken into two. There's a contract process and then there's a commissioning process. Now, there's a time we take to turn over the information to execute a contract and return that contract to somebody. We have a performance of target of 10 working days. For us, normally, on average, because we're doing everything electronic now, we get an electronic contract back to all our customers within 5 days. The commissioning process also, we turn around that very quickly. But where we find maybe there's a bit of delay, once we send off the instructions at the end of the contract process, the customer now has to go and get the GEI certification, and they also have to make certain payments and all of that. And I think right there is where we are waiting to get all of the information back in. But once we have everything done within that 10 days, we get them commissioned and they can go live. So there's a bit of interaction and there are multiple agencies, which unfortunately that's the situation. They have to go through the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology. In some cases, get documentation from the Bureau of Standards. And so there's a lot of handshaking that takes place before they actually get to us at JPS. At max, we have about 25 days, which we would take from start to finish with what we have to handle. But then there are the other external agents, which they have to. And so it can be a bit cumbersome with the amount of stops that they have to make.
So can I just pay somebody like ENBAR to do it, to just take care of the whole process?
We will tell you, go to sleep, you pay us, we'll cover it.
Okay.
So you will have companies that will take that pressure off you and will keep you updated on each step of the way. So it's very important to have that kind of input. But maybe the last part of all that I've said in terms of looking at who do you get, who to install your system, or do you need a project manager like myself, is the contract, not the standard of a contract, which Arrington just mentioned. That's a JPS contract with the client, but the contract with the solar provider. Oftentimes, persons get an invoice that says, 1 inverter, 4 panels, X amount of wires, transport, etc. And on the bottom of it, there may be a warranted for 1 year or whatever the time may be. But you really should get a proper contract that says to you that you should expect an average of so many kilowatt hours per month or per year, because then that gives you the expectation of what you should get. And a lot of what's been mentioned already. Sometimes people say, oh, I give you a 1 kilowatt system. So in the mind of the client, what does that mean? It's like Greek, right? But you have your JPS bill, you have your JPS app, and you can see kilowatt hours. In other words, the amount of power that you are using over a period of time. And your solar system can generate over that period of time. So you can actually compare, am I generating more power than I'm taking from JPS, same, or am I at a zero number? So that contract will give you some terms in terms of what you expect, in terms of the equipment warranty, your batteries, depending on how you manage them, may give you 3 to 5 years, but even that should be in your contract. And you may need a service contract, because when we talk about batteries, these batteries have to be maintained. They're like your car batteries in some cases.
How often should you have them maintained?
You should have them serviced at least on a quarterly basis, which most people don't know. They assume once you plug it in, you can...
Until it's dead.
Until it dies. And it will die on you quickly. Well, die on you prematurely if it's not serviced. The lithium batteries are do not require that level of maintenance. Again, that's a bit of information that your provider or your consultant will give you instructions on. And you want to be clear in your mind, what should you do? There are little things. Something happened to someone I knew. There was a fault in the system, and his breaker actually turned off his solar system for safety. And they didn't know. And a month passed, and they're wondering, why is their bill so high? But it says the breaker turned off, and you have to go there and turn that breaker back on. It's a simple thing. But if you don't
So how would you know that that happened?
Because the person saw that the electricity
No,
cost.
but before you get your bill, your big bill, is there any way to know that that has happened?
Well, if you're monitoring your generation, you will see. You will see nothing happens.
How do you
next
monitor
day.
the generation? You have apps and...
There are apps. So the easiest way is a little display that shows your generation from day to day. That's the easiest one. And that can just be built in where all your electricals are, where your JPS main service panels are. But you can also get that system sent to your phone or to your laptop. So if you are inclined, you can see every day, oh, I am generated. But if you look and you see a flat line, then, something's wrong.
Right.
You can call your providers for them to come and look at it. So.
Wow, a lot of information definitely there. So make sure that your provider is registered, they're certified, and they're competent. Very important to note. And some other key takeaways as well, making sure that you can bring your demand down before you actually go ahead and purchase solar electricity. I have a lot more questions about net billing. So first of all, anybody on here watching who follows me, I talk about money all the time, right? So how much does JPS pay for electricity that I may generate at home from my solar system and want to sell to you?
Okay, what JPS pays to nearly anybody who produces electricity is on par about the same amount. We have the private power companies who are out there. We call them independent power providers because there are other companies who supply JPS with electricity, and JPS in turn sells it back to the customers. So not all the electricity that's produced in the country is actually produced by JPS. There are private companies out there. So the regulator sets the rates at which we buy electricity from all persons who sell electricity to resell it at.
And what's that rate now?
The rate now for the net billing customers is about $18 something, 17, 18. It fluctuates
per
based
what?
on per kilowatt hour. And then what we buy from the IPPs right now is running somewhere a little over $20. So you can see they are almost about the same. Now what makes you have a difference in the cost when it gets to you is that in addition to the cost you buy electricity from, we have JPS operating cost, which is to that, and then it is sold to you. So it's like somebody growing yams in St. Elizabeth, and somebody has to drive to pick up those yams to take it to Coronation Market. That's basically what JPS does. We pick up the energy from all of these productions and we get it to you at your home, at your house, so that you can use it, right? So the price which we buy electricity at is comparable with the price we buy electricity from all the other private power providers out there. But the cost differential has to do with the additional cost to transmit and distribute electricity. The cost to maintain our transmission lines, our distribution lines, transformers, the whole 9 yards. There's an operating cost that goes with that. And
plus some profit.
Well,
yeah, naturally.
All companies, we are a regulated body, so the regulator sets those prices, and that's it. JPS doesn't ad hoc set their prices for anything. We are a regulated company, so the government assesses benchmarks internationally, assesses what is reasonable, what is fair for any investor who goes into business. They will make a profit, because that's what keeps their business going. So the government monitors that and ensures that what we are doing is fair.
All right, so if I have invested in a solar energy system for my home, and the system is producing energy during the day, see, I've taken my notes, producing energy during the day, and it's able to cover all my energy costs for the day, and I'm selling excess back to the grid, back to JPS, but I'm also using JPS's system at night. What do you do? Do you apply that as a discount to my bill, or do I just get the cash money, or how does this work?
Okay, let me explain something first. Your greatest opportunity is what you offset from JPS, right? That is when you use what you produce during the day to avoid buying from JPS. That's your greatest opportunity with a solar system. So it's set up that when you've used up all that you can use up, then the excess is sold to JPS. Now how it works is, there's a meter which is called a bidirectional meter that is sitting there monitoring how much power you are using and how much power you send back to the grid. At the end of the month, it totalizes your net export and it totalizes what you've consumed. On your one electricity bill statement, there's a line item, it comes on your bill as a negative number, and so it is the payment to you is subtracted from your bill. So if you were supposed to get, say, a $30,000 bill and your net exports came up to $10,000, you'd see a line item with minus $10,000 on the bill, and then you'd get the balance as your JPS bill. So it is removed from your bills monthly. So that's how persons would benefit from exports. So if their usage was $30,000, that $10,000 for exporting would be removed, and that's why it's called a net bill, right? And there's a big difference between net billing and net metering, right? But in what is approved by the regulator in Jamaica is what we call net billing.
So we don't do net metering.
We don't do net
so we don't
metering.
need to go into that.
I can explain it if you want to, but what happens with net billing is that there's a rate at which you buy electricity, and there's another line item, a rate at which you purchase or you sell electricity. So you're buying and selling, and it's on that bill. And those two statements are netted on the same statement to give you your final balance.
But there may be instances, as David mentioned, that some people go into it specifically to sell electricity to JPS. So there may be instances where JPS owes you more than you owe them. In that instance, do you get money? You get cash?
Yes.
Yes.
If there is a balance, because every 6 months or every year, if there's a net balance which JPS has to pay you back, there is a process in place where you can request it and we pay back that amount. That's how it's designed.
So you have to bear in mind that the current net billing regulations allows residentials to have up to 10 kilowatts, right? So if you have sufficient space, whether a roof or on the ground, or maybe a carport, like the PSOJ has a carport solar system, it is possible for you to generate much more than you can consume during the day. And so, yes, you would actually have a balance, and there's a schedule by which you should be paid. And as Errington has already said, there's a regulated tariff or rate by which you should be paid. So you can compute that number.
What I would highly suggest, though, whoever is selling you that system, they need to do that calculation for you upfront, show you what the potential energy production is going to be, and actually show you what your expected return is going to be. You make sure you see that so that you can weigh out that with whatever other financial obligations you have to ensure that it's actually a profitable venture that you're entering into. Because I know the program is the best use of the program, of the government's policy, is for you to offset it's to reduce the energy you purchase from the grid. That's the real objective of it. If you're going to be a net exporter, you make sure the persons do the numbers and the numbers are in your favor.
So going back to that example of a customer you showed us earlier, was that person not a part of the net billing program? Why they didn't see a substantial difference in their bill?
They were a part of the net billing program. But what they did is, there's a mindset. I have solar, I am good. I can do what I want to do, right? My bills are taken care of, right? So I'm gonna go do whatever I want to do after 5 p.m. Not understanding that there's a discipline to ensuring that it coincides with when electricity is being produced in the day. So if you just continue using electricity in the night without the controls and without the discipline, you can easily be eliminating your gains from having the offset in the day. And that's what you don't want to eliminate your gains. You want to make sure that you're being disciplined so that you can see the real savings. And I like what he said. He said energy efficiency. You have to have energy efficiency going on at the same time while you make this investment, meaning that you are looking at how efficient I'm using electricity. Am I using the best equipment? Am I optimizing on my choice of equipment to make sure that can I use something that is burning less electricity to do the same thing? That's basically it. And am I using electricity when I don't need to use it? Is the water heater left on right through the night when nobody is using hot water? You know, these things. Have I changed out and retrofitted all of my appliances, my light? Am I change out everything to LED? LEDs can go down close to 10% of what an incandescent, or even 5% of what an incandescent. That can be a huge saving.
My light bill fell by 30% when we changed out to LED.
Yeah, man. And security lights is also another big thing, you know, which Jamaica has a security problem. So most people, they don't want to turn off their security lights. They want to keep them on during the night. Can I replace those high pressure sodium or those other technologies with LEDs? You can actually get some very, very bright LEDs which are just maybe running you maybe 20 watts.
But better than that, you can take your security light completely off JPS, because the security lights do come with battery. So, and they're generating all day, and the only thing they use the power for is to run that light. So that doesn't even show on your bill.
I actually have a couple at my house. They're not attached to JPS, and they are on every night. The photocell turns them on, the floodlights every night, and it's totally off JPS. So it's not even the possibility, because it's not even wired to the system. You know, so there are technologies out there, you know.
I've seen that in some communities, like I think in Richmond, St. Anne, they have the solar lights that come on in the evenings.
And they're not that hard to get. I mean, True Value, for example, has them. You can just walk into some of these stores and they're there.
How much they cost?
The one I saw was for $25,000. It is on all day, all night, right? And it had a warranty period for, I think, about 3 to 5 years. So
I think PriceSmart carries them.
And PriceSmart carries them too. So you know, one of the things that people tend to calculate is the payback period, and that's just one indicator that when you have spent your money, you can get your money back within a certain time frame. But you would know, Kalilah, that your net present value is also an indication of the value that you have spent. So at the end of 5 years or at the end of 10 years, depending on what system you have, is your money worth more then than it was worth now? And that is part of how, that's part of the decision making. So although right now you might not be seeing your the returns you are expecting on a month-to-month basis, in the next 10 years, how much are you going to be paying for your solar system? Zero. And all that energy is going to be completely free. Now, when you do your net present value calculations or your ROI calculations, is it worth it to you? And your installer or your consultant can help you to make that decision.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of the payback, let's bring Volton back in here. Tell me about the investment and the payback for a typical residential household.
Okay, I have two cases here where these two customers have made their investment in a PV system, and this was actually their profile before they actually installed the system. Now, they would have done the usual thing in terms of installing their system on the roof, done an assessment in terms of whether it's shaded, point in the right direction, and everything.
So blue line is their consumption.
It's two consumption days, 2 days. And the point I'm trying to make, which was mentioned before, is
but
that
what's the blue line and what's the orange line? What are we looking at?
they're both load profiles, as we call it. It was mentioned earlier that you would use a power logger to measure how your load varied day by day, hour by hour. That's essentially what you have there. 2 different days, one with a higher consumption than the other. So on the top, what you would see there is this particular customer who used a lot of energy during the production period, which is between 7 to around 3 in the afternoon. And it's a high load, as you're seeing it there, right? Now, that particular customer has a pretty good payback. Why? Because he's consuming during the production period of the PV system. And that is the type of profile you would want for somebody who maybe works at home, or somebody who has maybe a business at home, where the system production and their work at home coincides. So essentially, that particular facility there, if you note, they have a better payback than the one below. In fact, for this particular system here, the cost of the system was 1-point-something million. And the savings was 48%. And the payback was 4.5 years. Why is that the case?
So in 4.5 years, the system paid for itself.
Yes, right. And the only reason for that is looking between the 7 until 4 o'clock where the load is pretty high. So as opposed to exporting the energy or storing it in a battery, they're actually using it during that period. And as a result of that, the payback period is 4.5 years, and they're displacing 48% of their normal consumption. Now, that is one of the best type of payback you can get for a residential customer, given the fact, as Errington mentioned, about the system operates for maybe around, they can displace around 1/3 of your consumption based on the period during which the system operates. The system means the PV system. And we're getting 4.5. For the next customer at the bottom, if you notice, during that 7 to 4 period, they have some amount of consumption during that period, but not as much as the customer before or the resident before, right? So therefore, their payback is not as good at all because they're not using or utilizing the energy produced by the PV system during that optimum period from 7 in the morning until maybe around 3 in the afternoon. So their profile is a lot lower, essentially. So as a result of that, their payback has gone to 8.5 years. And they can only displace around 17% of their total energy use.
Oh, so 8.5 years, and the batteries and the systems last how long? So like right around that time, they're going to have to be replacing it anyway.
And that's a very good point. That's a very good point. To the extent that you use batteries in your system, the cost increases by maybe around 40%. And then in maybe around 8 to best case, maybe 12 years, you have to replace those batteries again. And then so they just start all over again. So the payback keeps on going back, dependent on the quality of the batteries that you have. Because it can be as low as maybe every 3 years you need to change, every 5 years can be as much as 8, and it could be 12 years, dependent on the quality of the batteries. So the payback extends to the extent that you add batteries to your system. So that's why it was mentioned earlier that the best configuration is a grid-tied system, where you take from the grid as required, but you utilize as much of the energy as you can during that window of the system production. So better payback if it is you utilize the energy when it's produced, and the payback is not as good or longer if it is you do not consume the energy during that window of production.
All right, let's start taking some questions from YouTube. Let's see what our viewers have been saying. I have a question here, and it says, what if it's a new house, so there's no past usage data, but I want to do the installation before moving in? What do I do? Who can take that one?
I can take that. If the person is clear on the type of equipment they have, an energy audit is possible. And it's going to be a theoretical, it's going to be a desktop audit, because you're going to get a two-door French door fridge, you're going to get your TV and all those things. You can add up the consumption. So for example, your microwave might use 1.2 kilowatts. And how many times per month are you going to use that? It might be when you add it all up, 4 hours in a month. So it's a 4 times that 1.2. So someone can actually do that rough computation and also find out how many persons are in the home, for example, each person using X amount of volume of hot water. And they can do the compute and give an idea of how many kilowatt hours you might consume. And you can use that to size your system. It's better to size slightly smaller, because you can always add panels, than to size too big and you really not utilize that.
I think someone
It's not the best thing, but it's possible.
I think it's a great opportunity for someone who is moving into a new home, who is making those initial choices of the appliances that they are purchasing to make sure that they are getting energy efficient equipment. So unlike the person who has bought the double door refrigerator and all of that already, here's an opportunity for you to go to your supplier and ensure that you're getting energy efficient equipment to be placed in your new home. So it is really a great opportunity to make sure that your choice of equipment are energy efficient rated. You can speak to most of these distributors. They can direct you and tell you in terms of the kilowatt hour, expected kilowatt hour consumption, and then you have an opportunity to make that initial choice so that those consumptions are, so it's a great opportunity to select the correct equipment.
You wanted to add something, Volton?
Well, yes. The simulations, they're not difficult, providing the customer is clear as to exactly how they plan to operate and what they want to do. Because what you're really doing here, which is part of the challenge of a new development, is that our new facility, is that you're not too sure what will happen until you actually start. But having an idea in the equipment that you have, we can easily do a simulation. How you plan to operate. Do you plan to open a business or operate from home, for example? That tells us something in terms of the equipment you might have operating at a particular time. In terms of the number of persons in the house itself, and who's going to school, who's going to university, who's going to be leaving in the next few years. Things like that assist you in terms of doing a simulation as to what can happen when and what load profile would look like. But after that, you can fine-tune, as was indicated by here, that you can monitor exactly what is going on and make adjustments down the road if it is you need to add additional panels or maybe even reduce panels regarding the system you have installed. Yeah.
I have another question coming from Nick. Nick has a question about hazards. What are the implications for hurricanes, panels?
All right, I can take that one. That's a challenge, because obviously where we're located, we can't move the country, so we are subject to hurricanes. So it's very important if you're installing a photovoltaic system, a solar system, to understand how that system is attached to your roof, if it's on the roof, because that is the most important component. How it is attached to your roof. If your roof, for example, as in many houses, you have wooden rafters, you need to understand what level of engineering went into deciding how it would be attached to your roof. That will determine how easily your system can detach itself from the roof during hurricane conditions. Also, how the panels are, the panels are laid on what's called a racking system. It's basically a metal structure that the panels are bolted to it. It's good to also get information on how the panels have been secured to that system, and you may have to seek some consultation to get an opinion if this is up to par or not. And as mentioned, if you have a contract, it's even better that you can get some reference to say this system has been designed to resist a certain level of hurricane wind speed.
David, you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to say that in the solar business, we have been learning a lot, especially from Irma and Maria the last time around. And some of the things that will improve the survivability of your panels, your modules, really, on the roof, people call it panels. One is, because we are close to the equator, we actually don't need to have as steep an angle. So if you think about the bottom of your module and the top part, if the slope is lower, then you're less likely to lose it. So it is actually, you can produce quite a bit just lowering it down to about 13 or 15 degrees instead of 18. 18 will give you more, but 13 or 15 will give you what you need. Also, the systems that they use now to brace the modules onto the frames that Richard spoke about, they are much more rugged. Some of them are built with spring system that would prevent them from loosening up over time. And it is also possible to use what they call ballasts, weighting to hold the systems down. So there's much more that we have learned since those more recent hurricanes. And another thing that is also understood is that the way that hurricane winds move, you can reduce the likelihood of losing your panels or your modules by placing them at least a meter from the edge. So if you have a hip roof, right, putting your system right on the edge, you are likely to get it lifted. A meter up, it's actually impacted less by the wind force. If you have a slab roof, putting it right up to the corners, you may lose it because there's an updraft at the end of your building, bringing it in. So all of those things have already been simulated and designed. And so we're using more modern installation protocols to ensure that systems can be in place for Cat 4 hurricanes. In fact, some of the ones that happened recently, there are pictures of the roof with the panels still attached to them. The roof came off, but the panels are fully anchored. So we know more now.
How practical is it to uninstall your panels if you know a hurricane is coming?
If you're a residential customer and you have just a few panels and you're able to easily remove them, because on top of the panel there's a layer of glass. So if it's easy for them to be removed, then you can minimize that risk of damage to your panels. If you have a commercial system, the chances of you being able to remove all those panels is likely to be very challenging. So you want your system to be designed properly. If your installer, if you realize that your installer is using engineering codes, for example, you have the American Society of Civil Engineering Codes that helps to guide how systems are installed, and if they adhere to, for example, standards out of Florida, because Florida for America is also subject to hurricanes, then you're likely to get better designed and engineered and built systems.
Back to the contract, it may be good for your installer to include things like that, emergencies, in their contract. And some of them in Jamaica actually do include it. They will come to your house and take your systems off. And I would recommend that because a solar panel module that is in full sun can produce 600 volts. Your electric stove is only 220. 600 volts. It's not the kind of thing that you want everybody to be going up, you know, and disconnecting things. You will lose your life. The hurricane won't take you.
You're a professional to do that.
I would strongly recommend having that as a part of the clause with your company.
Okay, makes sense. Let's take some more questions from our YouTube channel. Carrie says, I want to live normally, use AC when I get home. I'm prepared to do what it takes to last me through the night. Will it be a feasible investment? I see the brain's working overtime.
So the short answer is, how much are you willing to pay for the
Depends on
lifestyle?
the size of the system. I guess, guys, we could maybe look at, say it's just a single unit for a bedroom as opposed to an entire house. And then they'd have to do some calculation in terms of the amount of kilowatt hours and how many hours you can get off a battery and what size battery can deliver that. Somebody will have to do an analysis, but it's possible based on the size. If it's a smaller unit, then in terms of the battery requirement, it should be less.
And that's where the measurements come in. That's where the simulation come in.
Yeah.
Because we do measurements and we do simulations. We can go on site and do the assessment using Solar Pathfinder, and for example, or we can use PV Sol, where we can put in your information and we can simulate based on your location exactly what you actually need to displace all the energy and the shading and everything. It can be done remotely, but in terms of the customer, it is site or customer specific in terms of what you can do.
So best advice to the assessment.
You have to do the assessment. You have to do the
And
assessment.
especially for residential customers, which is why I pause. It's very important to understand what is it the customer is trying to achieve.
Yes.
Is the customer trying to lower their energy cost, or is that they just want to see a JPS bill that is almost zero? Because you can have a JPS bill of zero, but you have a high energy cost. You're just paying that money somewhere else, whether it's to a bank or somewhere else.
All right, I have a question about red flags. I think David has pointed out some. Someone is asking, if a provider offers me an off-the-shelf package, is that a red flag?
I would be a little cautious. I would, because whereas you can have very customized systems, they don't install themselves. So where you put it, if you put it in the shade, it's not going to deliver what you expect, right? If you connect it in the wrong configuration, you're not going to get what you expect. And of course, it's electrical. So you face the risk of hurting yourself. So I would be a little wary if someone just offers me something. So let me just make one proviso. Systems like outdoor lighting may be more easily installed because they're packaged, the battery is built in, you really just need to mount it, right? But other systems, I would be a little bit cautious, and I'd prefer to get a professional to put it in place. And it doesn't have to be that expensive.
Okay. Shani wants to know, is there a list of those licensed to provide solar service in Jamaica? I suppose she means selling the equipment.
So there isn't a formal list, but the Development Bank of Jamaica has a list of what they call certified energy managers. Those are persons who have done the professional certification programs to show that they understand energy and how it works. That list also has companies which have installed solar over a long period of time. You do have other entities that the ministry itself, MSET, the Energy Ministry, has a list of companies that have done work in the past, but there isn't an official national list, no.
Okay, we're coming close to the close of our program. We still have a few more questions on YouTube. I think most of the questions remaining have been answered already, but for those of you who may have joined us late and maybe you didn't quite catch the answer, let me ask the question. So let's go first with this one from Scarlett. How often should the batteries be changed and what's the durability? So care to go over that?
Well, how often the battery should be changed is really once the battery has expired, meaning it's no longer providing a service, it has been depleted. Just like your car battery, once it's no longer starting a car, it's dead. So once your battery is underperforming, you realize it's not carrying you through the night or an evening as it did before. You can start looking out for it that eventually it needs to be checked out to see whether maybe just one battery or one cell is bad, or you're getting to the end of life of your entire set of batteries and they need to be replaced. For lithium-ion batteries, they tend to be a bit more reliable. It's either that there's an electrical fault and it's not working, or it will go through to its normal life cycle, and over time, its production, its ability to charge, just like your cell phone battery, will gradually decline.
Another question here that we did go over before, but just in case you joined late and you missed it, how does JPS deal with our excess?
Okay.
That's
I'm glad you raised that again, because there are a lot of persons who have installed solar and have not been, have not formalized the solar installation. So maybe I just want to make a point about that. There is a process with the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology for people to have their systems licensed. What you find happening a lot in the market, there are a lot of persons who are investing in systems, putting on those systems on their house, but they have not gone through any process to regularize that in terms of the licensing requirement by the ministry. For those customers, the excess power that they produce, it's not recorded and there's no benefit for it. Only those customers who are on the net billing program, who are licensed and who have been gone through the commissioning and are on the system as net billing customers, would benefit from the excess power that they produce. What happens, there's a bidirectional meter, a special meter that's placed at the location of the net billing customers. Most other customers' meters are not enabled to perform this function. That is measuring the power that is delivered to them, and it's also measuring the power that is exported. And at the end of the month, those usages turn up on their statement, their billing statement, and they receive the credit for the power that they export at the end of the month.
And here's a new question. This is the last one we're going to take for this evening. With electric vehicles coming on stream, can we use solar to charge cars?
It's the most obvious, best solution for charging your car. Whether you can get that at your location is another matter. So a carport design can be made where the panels, modules, sit right on top of the carport. The charger is built underneath. You drive in, you plug in. That's the purest option. But the configuration within your house can also allow you to benefit from the power that you produce during the day, especially if you have batteries which are storing it. You can charge your car overnight. But also there's a time of use option that people can benefit from during the off-peak. If you program your car to start charging, or program your charger, to start charging during the off-peak, then you will have a lower charging rate. But yes, the answer is yes, solar can.
Anything you wanted to add to that, David?
No, nothing else to add. As you said, it's true. You can charge your car from solar. You're feeding solar into your home, in your electrical panel. So your car is just like any other load in your house. You just try and use that energy that you're producing by charging your car. So you try and produce. The key thing is...
So charge it in the day.
Charge it in the day. That's what you want is you want to produce your electricity at the lowest cost possible and use that to get the best margin you can on that investment. And that is displacing what you would purchase from utility with low production cost electricity. The lowest you can get from solar first is grid tied. Once you add batteries, your production costs will go up. So you always have to know the numbers if you're trying to lower your energy cost.
Is anybody working on solar panels for cars?
They don't need to be.
They don't need to.
Say that again?
They don't need to have special panels for that.
Oh, but I'm just thinking about the size.
There are some cars which are maybe closer to experimental where they actually put the panels on the roof. It's not the usual hard glass, and so it's embedded in the roof and on the bonnets. So it charges the car directly to some extent, while it's out there in the sun. But other than that, a solar panel does not need to be specific to a car, no.
Oh, but how you install it? Because installing on the roof of a car would be different than installing
I
on
think
the
it's
roof of
still
your
experimental.
It's wired.
Just
it's wired
get some bungee cords and strap it on.
It's wired into your car just like all the wiring in your car, and it's not an issue. You wash your car as you would in any other way.
Yeah. So it would be the typical type of module or panel with the metal frame around it. It's a thin film, so it's embedded into the roof of your car.
In fact, what they call built-in integrated photovoltaics actually now come in slate, for example. So if you have a slate roof, you know, you can use those. They can be used as a facade on the front of your building. All of those things are already in play. I did want to just touch on two quick things. One is that you do have a tariff for EVs, and JPSCO is very active among other entities in building out charging stations island-wide, and some of those are going to be charged by solar. So it's not a biggie. And in Barbados, they have charging stations all island around, you know, and in some places the buses have panels mounted on them.
So. Well, this was a very enlightening conversation. See what I did there? Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I do want to encourage you to take our feedback survey. It is pinned in the comments. So take that feedback survey. Tell us what you thought about this particular discussion. And also make sure that you join us next, the first Thursday of next month for our next discussion. I have so many key takeaways that I was jotting down, but I think the biggest lesson from this is that even when you have a solar energy system in your home, you still need to conserve as much as possible, because you still run the possibility that it doesn't benefit you very much. And that example of the customer whose bill only went down by $5,000 and still stuck with a loan repayment of $20,000 and now ends up having to pay back more than they were originally paying on their light bill, that example really sticks with me. I hope it sticks with you as well, so that you know if this is an investment you're seeking to make, that you still need to be responsible with the energy that you consume. So many other cool takeaways, but that's going to do it for this episode of Talking Energy with JPS. I'm Kalilah Reynolds. See you next month.